Acast powers the world's best podcasts. Here's a show that we recommend.
I'm Vanessa Zoltan, and I'm a Jewish atheist non-denominational chaplain.
And I'm Matt Potts, and I'm an Episcopal priest and a professor at Harvard Divinity School. And we co-host the podcast Harry Potter and the Sacred Text, which is a week-by-week read-through of the Harry Potter books, where we treat those books as if they were sacred texts.
What we mean by that is not that we think that the text is perfect or that we respect their author, but that they can teach us how to be more loving in the world.
Listen to the show on the Acast app or wherever you get your podcasts. New episodes drop on Thursdays.
Acast helps creators launch, grow, and monetize their podcasts everywhere. Acast.com.
This is a Shares for Beginners quick tip. Essential lessons, questions answered. IPOs, or initial public offerings, can be difficult to understand. Julian McCormack is an investment specialist at Platinum Asset Management. In this quick tip, he discusses if and how you should approach IPOs. So, Julian McCormack, we have a listener question, and this is about IPOs, which are initial public offerings. How do you assess a risk profile of an IPO without historical data and often limited financial history, or is it all just too hard and risky for beginners?
Thanks, Phil. Look, there's clearly less information around a new offering usually, but it does actually depend on the business. Some businesses have long operating track records and go to IPO as a consequence of any manner of things, management change or need for capital or whatever. But they've been operating for a long time. There are historical financials in there. You might know the product, well. So that's very different to something that's a novel idea and a new issuance, and you don't know anything about the business. So that's pretty tough. People must accept that the majority of new businesses don't work. There's not that many Microsofts. So that should be your baseline. Again, you're in the kind of environment where people want to have a flutter or there's all these great ideas. So it's all very exciting. Look, if you want to have a go, have a go. I'm that way inclined myself. But know that the majority of new businesses fail, and also the majority of new businesses that need to ask you for capital are probably particularly likely to fail. So without a long track record, a demonstrated ability to make money through cycles, you must accept it's very, very risky.
And it's also very difficult to get set in an IPO as well, unless you've got very good connections with a brokerage firm.
Yeah, generally. That said, not necessarily. Part of IPOs is getting spread, and oftentimes you get this real pump into retail channels in order to get spread. So enough people that hold the thing to give it liquidity. But people just must ask, if you're selling, why am I buying? What is it about this that makes it worth my time? And if you can't answer that question, I think the answer is pretty obvious.
So the risk profile would be in the red zone, according to your view of these things, and not really for beginners?
Absolutely. In general, absolutely. New businesses asking for capital for the first time, yeah, good luck.
It's interesting. I just wanted to bring up the case of Airbnb, which listed just recently and has done spectacularly well. But earlier in the year, a story that I read was that the CEO and founder of Airbnb, of course, this was a business that was chronically hit by the COVID situation, and he had to end up going home and live with his mother, which is not a really good sign for a company you want to invest in my opinion.
No, exactly. Now, nothing against Airbnb. No calumny on that. It's just a funny example. But Airbnb is a great example of the temporal dislocation in markets, right? The UK has gone back to lockdown. We've got new and more virulent coronavirus. We're actually, in reality, we're a bit unsure about how this whole vaccination thing is going to work. But I'll bid a home sharing business to the moon. That's because markets are saying, yeah, I can look through all that. The business can survive all that. It'll get to a point at some point in the future where it's worth a lot, versus its current price. So it's a great example of that timing disconnect between markets and the real economy. But it's also potentially a good example of people getting very enthusiastic and maybe not paying enough attention to risk.
So, IPOs, not for beginners.
They're tough.
Thank you very much for joining me, Julian.
Thanks, Phil.
Shares for Beginners is for information and educational purposes only. It isn't financial advice, and you shouldn't buy or sell any investments based on what you've heard here. Any opinion or commentary is the view of the speaker only, not Shares for Beginners. This podcast doesn't replace professional advice regarding your personal financial needs, circumstances, or current situation.
Acast powers the world's best podcasts. Here's a show that we recommend.
I'm Vanessa Zoltan, and I'm a Jewish atheist non-denominational chaplain.
And I'm Matt Potts, and I'm an Episcopal priest and a professor at Harvard Divinity School. And we co-host the podcast Harry Potter and the Sacred Text, which is a week-by-week read-through of the Harry Potter books, where we treat those books as if they were sacred texts.
What we mean by that is not that we think that the text is perfect or that we respect their author, but that they can teach us how to be more loving in the world.
Listen to the show on the Acast app or wherever you get your podcasts. New episodes drop on Thursdays.
Acast helps creators launch, grow, and monetize their podcasts everywhere. Acast.com.